very special guest, Coach Dan DiNicola. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Hey, Justin, appreciate you having me on.
Coach DiNicola, he is the offensive line coach at Dexter Southfield in Boston, Massachusetts. And he's also a rep for Catapult Sports, the wearable sports tech. So to dive right into it, Coach, can you just share with the audience a little bit about your background, how you got involved coaching, and also about your experience at Catapult?
Yeah. So happy to do that. So really, it's kind of a loaded question as far as how I got involved with coaching, because prior to high school starting, I didn't even know that I wanted to play football. It's something that kind of had to be brought out in me by the coach that I had at Dexter Southfield. So I'm from Walpole, Massachusetts, about 20 minutes outside of Boston. Parents sent me to private school because, I was looking around, shopping around. They just didn't want me going to public school. And ended up landing on a couple of different places. It was actually Dexter Southfield that I was looking for a school to play baseball at. And that's originally how I ended up there. And then I ended up kind of not panning out as much as I would have liked as a baseball player, to say the least. But being 6'5", 220, 230 at the time, it was pretty much mandatory that I at least go out for the football team. And we had a small enough team that I was kind of pressed right into it immediately to go be the team's right tackle. First year ended up breaking my arm actually, but kind of, that ended up lending itself pretty well to, me having to get in the weight room and kind of forcing myself to bolster myself up to be a contributing member. But from there on, I was kind of a starter, and how that ties into coaching is the guy that I played for at Dexter Southfield, Casey Day. He's now still the head coach, and I've been on his staff for the past 5 years. So I guess how I got involved with coaching was really the relationship that I built with the coaching staff, as it's the exact same staff while I was a player. So that's kind of why I tied it all the way back to my playing days. No, but since I've been at Dexter Southfield, we've had a lot of really, really good players come in. And honestly, the reason that I've stayed and continue to be a part of it, we just have such a passionate group of players, particularly on the offensive line, that really, really, kind of forced me to be at my best every single day. I never feel like I'm taking time out of my day, doing anything that I wouldn't otherwise rather be doing. I've found that when I have a free minute, I'm thinking about, drawing up offensive line indies. I'm thinking about different ways that I could help out coaching, even when I'm not doing my full-time work with Catapult. So definitely when you feel that sense of needing to continue to help something grow and, assist people in something they're passionate about, there's definitely kind of an urgency to make that a major part of your life. So that's kind of how I started into coaching and why I've continued to coach. And then as far as Catapult, it's actually kind of funny. I knew that after college, I wanted to work in sports technology to a certain degree. I knew that that's something that, just having played at University of Massachusetts, I was passionate about, wanting to still be part of a team's internal process. Didn't know if I wanted to work for a team formally or for a vendor to a team. And it just so happened that after, a couple sales jobs, COVID getting in the way of a couple of things, Catapult was hiring, and Catapult was hiring in Boston, about a mile from my apartment. So jumped right on that, told them in the interview process, look, I am a high school football coach as a part-time gig. But that's something that I need to be doing. And it's something that I look at as a very important part of my life. They supported it thoroughly. And it helps because there's some continuity at what we do for Catapult, with kind of helping teams with tracking their athletes and, getting all sorts of metrics on their players. And then being a coach myself, you don't have to flip-flop too much between the two different aspects of your life. So hopefully that suffices as an answer. I know that was a little bit loaded.
Yeah. So tell me more about what it's like actually coaching with your former coaches that coached you in high school, Because I'm sure that that's been an interesting process, right?
Yeah, it's been incredibly interesting being able to coach with the guys that kind of introduce me to the game. So, I mean, they're always quick to remind you of, funny stories back when you played, and they're always quick to kind of bring up your past and joke around with you about it. But what's been incredible for me to see is the growth of the program. Just the ability year after year for Coach Day and the guys on his staff to get players motivated to play at their absolute best. I mean, it's been an incredible journey to see how the teams progress. When I first got there in 2011, it would have been 2010, 2011. We were a 2-6 team. Most of the games that we played in that we lost, we got absolutely killed. And it's funny because my first year of high school was actually Casey Day's first year coaching at Dexter Southfield. So, to kind of see my own maturation and, how I translated that to college and some of the things that I learned. And then, obviously going to UMass, playing under Mark Whipple, playing under, a bunch of different guys who, had all this acumen and knew a ton about football and all the intricacies of it, to then come back to coaching high school. I was expecting there to be kind of a major drop off. As I've grown as a football player and now coach, I came back and the program was in a very similar position to be that I was used to in college. I mean, I came back and there was a very high attention to detail in everything that we did. Things seemed a lot more regimented than they'd ever been. So what's been really cool is to see sort of the maturation of the program as I've matured in the game of football as well.
Yeah. So obviously playing Division I football at UMass and obviously playing at your alma mater and now coaching there, you have a pretty intricate understanding of the position. So how has that impacted the way that you coach individual players on the offensive line? And how has that progressed over the course of your 5 years?
Yeah, so I would say, it's definitely been impactful to have played under such great coaches while I was at UMass. I mean, I got a chance to play for Shane Waldron, who, OC in the NFL. Mike Foley, who had 30, 40 plus years, was the offensive line coach as soon as Shane Waldron went to the NFL, and just guys with so much acumen. And then of course playing under Mark Whipple in his offense. I mean, there's just so much to be learned there that diving in as a complete novice when I first got to college, there was just so much that I needed to be caught up on. For example, first day they had me running with the scout D holding the bag for the starting offensive line. They told me to get in the 3 technique, and I didn't even know what that was. And I think sometimes coaches don't necessarily understand how big of a gap there is from the high school to college level, depending on where you went to high school. So as I said, at Dexter, we were very much a novice program. And coming out of there, I had a lot to learn. I had a lot to catch up on. But I think now that I'm able to sort of impact the players that I coach based on what I learned at UMass, I feel that a lot of them are more prepared for the college level. And that's something where what we really, really hone in on is the X's and O's, making sure that we know who we're blocking on every single play. But not just understanding who we're blocking, we have to understand how and why. And I think that's sometimes the thing that, coaches can always teach who to block. Okay, you have the Mike, you have the Will, you have to block down on the 3 tech, you have to, kick out the MN on the line, all different things that we'll say. But it's understanding the concept of the play, and then also understanding the optimal positioning that you have to get your body into and how to do that. Like, what's my first step? What's my second step? Where should I have my eyes? Where's my alignment? All different things that don't necessarily compute naturally, where you kind of take that for granted after going to college, playing at, the Division I level, but also, like I said, Division I, II, and III. It's just a completely different ballgame as far as the level of attention to detail that needs to be addressed.
Definitely. And going off your one point, it's even at my level playing at Gettysburg College, the difference between athletes who were at larger programs who had that attention to detail earlier on was definitely significant and evident in my career. So with that said, so getting a little more into the X's and O's of offensive line play, what are some drills maybe that you go through like in Indy? I know when I was a player, every single day we would work on just drill and drill and drill our first step and our second step and just go through progressions and that's, you know, even going back to my high school days.
Yeah. So I guess some drills, it's tough to, I guess I can't necessarily display it for you right here unless you want me to stand up and start moving around. You know, I'd say just overall, it's kind of teaching the most basic fundamentals step by step. A drill that I really like to do is, you know, I like to have people practice a base block on a med ball, understanding that you're lifting up through rather than pushing. I hate the shields. I never want to block with the shields. Understanding that we're lifting people off the line of scrimmage, really honing in and focusing when we practice drive blocking on the relationship with the ground, violent steps, full foot in the ground. So we do a lot of very, very basic drive blocking drills, and we drill that home like crazy. Like that's something that we probably do about 50 to 100 times a week. On top of that, I think it's really important for players to work on zone schemes. So I think for the offensive line, understanding, okay, if it's a 4 down front versus a 3 down front, let's line half of our offensive line up and let's say, okay, we have a 3 down front. We're going to tag with the front side guard and tackle. We're going to have the center walk through a zone scheme going right, and basically just having them feel it out with flowing linebackers, defensive linemen that might be twisting. That's something that I found has been really beneficial. Also, sometimes in those drills, throwing in wrinkles where you might have 2 guys go through the B gap, and how do we sort that out? Because again, defenses are supposed to be gap sound. At the high school level, they're 100% not going to be. That's one thing that you can count on, is that a kid's going to make a mental error at least once during a game. So if we can make mental errors on offense, we need to account for the fact that people can make mental errors on defense. So I usually throw in those wrinkles, try and kind of confuse them a little bit so that they can have that confusing situation happen in practice, and I can stop and explain it the optimal way to work on it. A lot of drills that I work on, you know, incorporate outside zone. You know, I think that's something where a lot of players, they like to just sort of press on the inside shoulder of the defensive lineman rather than what Mike Foley, my offensive line coach, taught me, is give up ground to gain it back, rip with your backside arm, try and get optimal surface area in front of the person that you're blocking. That's something where you'll see a lot of kids will pile drive somebody into the ground, leaning on them, not understanding that the running back behind them sees a defensive lineman or a linebacker right at the point of attack, and they're thrown for a loop. Yeah, they might have a highlight reel block, but once they go against better athletes, 1, they're going to start losing that 9 times out of 10. And 2, you know, it kind of disrupts the natural flow of the play. So I think what I've really tried to hone in on is having our players understand not only who they're blocking, but how and why they're blocking them based on the concept of the play. So there's a number of different drills. You know, I like to focus a lot on staying square and pass protection. I like to, you know, one drill that I really think helps a lot is a 2-bag punch. You know, having a player post down on their inside foot and punch with 2 hands and then scan outside for the other bag, maybe have isolated punches on that, with the main goal and focus to be square with your shoulders, square with your hips, and just making sure that you're covering up as much optimal surface area as you can with your inside foot. So I know that sounds a little complicated. It sounds a lot. We have about 5 drills that we do, and we just try and be absolutely perfect in every single time that we do it.
Yeah. And it all comes back to the fundamentals. If you can really hammer that in for your players, it's going to resonate. And
Right.
when you throw wrinkles at them, if they know what are the fundamentals and what's this philosophy then from there you can really understand, okay, if let's say the linebacker ends up going A gap versus B gap, you can understand, okay, I have to change my view and move on
Right.
to the next man coming up. So definitely appreciate that. So what advice would you give, let's say, you 5 years ago when you were just starting off as a coach?
Got it. So my biggest piece of advice to anyone getting started in coaching, and what I would probably say to myself about 5 years ago is, look, you need to be patient. You need to understand that everyone comes to the game with different levels of background, different levels of understanding. As you alluded to, you could kind of tell the difference between the people who came from the bigger programs versus people who came to the smaller programs. And understand that it's high school. You've got such a wide range of ages. You've got little kids all the way to people who are becoming young adults. So you need to be patient with everybody that comes in. Number two would be to over-explain. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with being patient. You need to over-explain the little details that you don't necessarily think about as somebody who's now gone through 5 years of college football. You want to come back and impart all this wisdom on them. You want to tell them all the different little intricacies that you learned, but we need to start from square one, and we need to really over explain things. And I think that when you do that, when you drill things home 4 or 5 times with a very, very detailed explanation as to why things are supposed to happen, and why you're telling them to do certain things on the field, you're going to start to get better results, and you're going to start to build that foundation that they'll need for, playing college football, or even if they're not looking to play college football, just learning a new skill. And not only just kind of learning it and being okay at it, really becoming a master of a craft. You're going to have to over explain things, and be patient in the process. So that would be my biggest advice to me 5 years ago.
And you're 100% right. Even if a player's not going to play in college, it's about instilling those fundamentals in them, helping them understand how to learn a skill.
Well,
And
yeah, and sorry, I don't mean to cut you off here, but I think, and this might kind of be something if you want to edit this up and tie it off here, like I I think that it's also a piece of advice that I would give is, understand that each player has a different ceiling. It's your responsibility as a coach to try and get them as close to that ceiling as you possibly can. So, for certain guys, like I said, we have some people who come in and they're Division I FBS. You see them, even just moving around, and you can tell sometimes by just the way people move around, even if they don't necessarily know the game that well. That could be a Division I FBS player. That's somebody with absolute limitless potential. And you see some people where, hey, like they may not have that high of a ceiling, but they're still worthy of being they're still worthy of being worked to their fullest potential. And that's really, I think, the responsibility of a coach is to get the most out of your players. Be patient, be diligent in the process of explaining things to them in order to get that end result of, hey, this person from where they started to where they ended up, they made the most of that opportunity. And I think that's our responsibility as coaches.
sure. Before we hop off here, any last words of advice you want to share with the audience?
I'll say is I really appreciate the opportunity for you to let me come on here. And I think sort of my last words of advice to any person who's in coaching or, is interested in coaching, is to be part of collaborative experiences like this. If someone reaches out to you and they want to interview you and learn a little bit more about your process as a coach, give them a shot, talk to them, tell them a little bit about it. Because we as coaches, I mean, there's not really like a roadmap to how to do this, because every situation is kind of case by case. But the more that we can collaborate, the more that we can have conversations that are open-ended, and we can have free-flowing thoughts about what we think is the best way to help players. I think we should welcome those conversations, and we should continue to have them, because look at like it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. So we need kind of a helping hand throughout the process. And I think platforms like this are awesome for allowing coaches to express themselves and, talk about their experiences, and for other coaches to really learn and start to get better at their craft.